This happened when I was a young woman of 20 years old. I had broken up with my boyfriend about 2 weeks before. We had been together a few months and he was becoming more and more possessive over me, trying to control what I did and who I saw, and on one occasion had even hit me. When we broke up, I felt free and started hanging out with my friends more. On the night it happened, I had been out drinking with my friends. Most of them were going on to a nightclub, but I had work in the morning, so decided to head home. I tried to make it for the last bus, but it pulled out just as I turned the corner, so I decided to walk. After walking a while, I had a choice of continuing along the well-lit streets or save myself a 20-minute shortcut down a dark path through a deserted park. As I walked down the path in the darkness, I heard footsteps behind me. I glanced behind to look and thought I could see a hooded figure a little distance away. I quickened my footsteps. The next thing I knew, I was being grabbed from behind with a hand smothering my mouth and nose. There was a distinct smell of chemicals. Then I must have passed out because everything went dark. I don't know how long I was out. I opened my eyes in complete darkness. I was laying down flat and tried to get up, but my head bumped on something above me. I felt around with my hands, then I reached inside my pocket and pulled out my phone, turning on the torchlight. I screamed with horror at the realization that I was locked in some sort of box or coffin. I kicked and punched and began frantically calling for help, scratching at the wood with my nails. I checked my phone for a signal, but there wasn't one. I began to cry, thinking I was going to die. After a few minutes, I turned on my side and began to push and bang the wood as hard as I could with my shoulder. I felt soil fall in through the cracks in the wood, and again I screamed for help. I noticed my breathing becoming heavier and began to panic even more, pushing and banging the wood with my shoulder. And after a few minutes, I heard a cracking sound. The wood was breaking. I found a renewed energy and pushed and banged harder with my shoulder, and with great relief the wood broke and a heap of soil fell on top of me. I clutched hold of my phone and clambered my way out of the coffin. I stood surrounded by trees. The light was still dark, and on a nearby tree there was a note. I shone my phone light over it, and trembling with fear, I read the words, "Next time will be deeper." My ex-partner was spoken to by the police, but was never charged as there was insufficient evidence. But on the rare occasions I see him, he always stands and stares with a creepy smile on his face. When I was in my early 20s, I had a job as a sales rep for a cleaning firm. I would travel around the UK, showcasing our goods to different companies. On this occasion, I was heading down to Cornwall. It was late autumn and the weather had taken a turn for the worse, with heavy rain and thunderstorms. This was in the early 60s. There were no cell phones or sat-nav systems to help you find your destination. It was just you and the road signs and a paper map if you had one. Due to the bad weather, I had taken a wrong turn somewhere. The heavy rain was restricting my vision. I should have stopped and pulled over, but there wasn't much daylight left, so I carried on driving, hoping I would come across a sign or a property sooner or later, but I didn't. The long country roads just kept on coming, and the rain kept on falling. As it became darker, I decided to pull over. With the rain and storm, it was getting too dangerous to carry on driving. I pulled up in a secluded spot on the edge of some woods. I clambered over to the back seat and tried to get some sleep. I was woken in the middle of the night with a start at the sound of someone knocking at my car window. I got out of the car and looked around, but couldn't see anyone. I called out to see if anyone was there, but nobody answered. Then, just as I was making my way back to the car, I spotted a light in the distance through the trees in the woods. I started heading on foot towards the light. I got close enough to see the light was coming from a cabin and was hopeful that whoever lived there would help me out with directions, or even better, help me out with accommodation till morning. But as I got closer, I started to get the feeling someone was watching me. I could hear the sound of twigs breaking and leaves crushing. Then, all of a sudden, I felt a heavy thump on the back of my head and everything went black. I woke up buried in a shallow grave. When I sat up, the soil fell away and I spit out bits of mud from my mouth. My head felt sore and there was blood on my hands as I touched it. I checked my pockets and found my wallet and car keys were missing. I then hurriedly made my way back to the car, but it was gone. It was raining, cold and dark, and I was stranded in the middle of nowhere. I felt I had no choice but to make my way back through the woods to the cabin for help. When I knocked the door, a tall, stocky man in his 20s answered. I tried to explain what had happened, but he just stared at me in silence. Then an old woman called out from inside the cabin for me to come in, and that her son couldn't talk or hear very well. After I explained what happened, she gave me some soup and bread and tended to my wound. She said they didn't possess a telephone and that their old car wasn't working, so I would have to wait till morning to try and hitch a ride into the nearest town. I slept on the couch and woke early the next morning. After a cup of coffee, I thanked the old woman and her son and made my way to the door to leave. But as I turned the handle, I noticed a shovel standing up against the wall with what looked like bloodstains on it. A rush of anxiety ran through me. I kept my composure and walked casually away from the cabin, but after about 50 yards, I spotted a freshly dug grave. I stopped and slowly turned round. The old lady and her son were still standing at the cabin door, watching me. I gave them a tentative wave. Then to the left of the cabin, I spotted what looked like the front end of my car, covered by bushes. I quickened my steps to the roadside and didn't have to wait long for a car to give me a ride into town, where I went straight to the police. The old woman and her son and my car had gone by the time the police got there, but they did find the owner of the cabin buried in the freshly dug grave.